I actually didn't want Atari to put too many hints in the thing because I wanted it to be the adventure game. And they really did not listen to me about that. They said, no, we're going to put stuff in the manual, and they were right. Because, you know, this is pre-internet. Right nowadays, you can go and look up what to do on your game when you're stuck in your game. And that's great. You know, that's a great thing to have. We didn't have that. You can also update a game. You know, imagine if E.T. would have been done recently, there would have been a few updates. You know, you couldn't do that back then. So, E.T. is going to be easier on some levels to figure out. There's a few things you can notice just running around that are consistent and keep going. Raiders, what a monster game to figure. I wouldn't want to figure that game out without the manual, and I programmed it. You know, so it's like, cheers to you. I mean, that's like...
Oh, no, we filled a notebook with us just trying to figure out, okay, if you go here and you feel like maybe you can use the parachute to go in the hole in the wall, all that stuff.
Oh, I'll bet, but you were able to get through it, though.
Yeah, 2 years of every day after school, that's all we did.
That's grit and determination. You got to respect that.
No, this was just last year.
What advice do you have for new indie developers?
For new indie developers, I have some good advice for new indie developers. You need to be resilient. You need to be able to tolerate failure. Because I've heard there's 100 new games a day or something like that that come out, and one of them will make any money. It's brutal. It's a brutal business because so many people can do it. It's the old thing, okay? So here's the thing. When it comes to writing a novel, making a movie and stuff like this, people who make movies and people who write books know that everybody thinks, if I can write a great novel, okay? If I could hold a camera and take a picture, I could make a great movie. Everybody believes that because really all you need to do to write a great novel is write the words in sequence, and there you go. That's all there is to it. So with a video game, if you have access to the tools to create some moving graphics on a screen, you can make a fantastic video game. And that's true. But for some reason, not everyone who can writes a great novel. And not everyone who can make a video game can make a great video game. So although it's true that 100 games come out like a day or something like that, most of them suck. I mean, they really, really suck because they're done by people who don't really know what they're doing. Because having the capacity to do something does not mean you can do it well. So, if you're an indie developer, I'm assuming you're someone who's really focused on doing it well and has some background with it and is really focused on it. Because if you're not, then the best advice I could have is do something else. Right? Because that's going to be a tough way to go. But if you're really focused and this is where you're at, this is where your heart's at, this is really what you want to do, you need to remember that you're working in a long-range goal of trying to create some product that's going to work, that's going to entertain people. And you need to learn to tolerate failure. If you go into that with the expectation that we're going to change the world with our next game, all I need is to do the next Angry Birds. Yeah, you know, that's all you need to do. But if your first Angry Birds doesn't work, and your second Angry Birds doesn't work, and your 15th Angry Birds doesn't work, are you still an indie game developer? You know, if you are, you're going to do 20 of them. You're going to do 40 of them. You're going to keep doing the stuff, and you're going to keep learning from where you were to see what you can do. See, the thing about software and making games is a very special part of software, okay? Because most software development, the vast majority of software development, is about, here's a spec, write a program that implements this spec. And there are people who think that's challenging, but they are wrong, okay? Because if you have an objective spec to meet and you are writing code, usually you know what code does, and if you can see a way to implement what it is you're trying to do, bingo, you do it. And if it meets the spec, if you do what was expected of you, then you're done. And you did a fine job, and it works. Video games are a little different, okay? With video games, you have 100% of the challenge of any programming task. You still have to meet a spec, and the spec is your game design. But the kicker in video games is that at the end of the product, it has to be fun. And that's a subjective standard to meet. Most programming has to meet an objective standard. And so you can say, you know, people say, you can't say, well, it didn't show up with a character turn. You know, what, the lights didn't go on when I hit this button, or they did. You know, okay, if they did, it works. If they didn't, it doesn't work. But there's no subjective there. In games, it has to work and it has to be fun. And that have to be fun thing, that is a really tough requirement to meet in software, right? So you got to remember that if you're a game developer, you are first and foremost an entertainer.